When powerful Judge Horace Blackwood mercilessly condemned an innocent man, lawyer Alan Sterling faced glaring injustice. This man, who dispensed the law, was a callous manipulator, destroying lives for his own gain. But one tiny inconsistency in old transcripts gave Alan the key to exposing Blackwood's entire dark empire. Prepare for a story where every step leads to shocking truth and inevitable reckoning. My name is Alan Sterling, and in this wild, dusty town, my name has always been synonymous with order. I'm a lawyer, and my reputation is built on facts, not rumors. But one day, when Judge Horace Blackwood, a man with cold eyes and an iron fist, pronounced the verdict on young Tommy Mercer, something went wrong. Tommy, a boy from a decent family, was accused of cattle rustling, a crime for which in these parts you'd be hanged without much deliberation. I, his lawyer, knew the evidence was weak, based solely on the testimony of one farmer, known for his grumpiness. 20 years of hard labor with no right to appeal. The judge's voice echoed through the hall, and intrigue immediately clenched my heart. It was too harsh even for Blackwood. Something flickered in his eyes, something that made me doubt his impartiality. He rarely made mistakes, but this verdict seemed not just harsh, but unjust. It took me a few days to truly recover from that shock. Not because of the verdict itself. I'd seen hundreds of those, unfortunately, but because of how easily Blackwood had nullified a young man's life. Such coldness, even for him, was unusual. This feeling wouldn't leave me alone. It literally forced me to start digging. First, I decided to re-examine the testimony of the key witness, old farmer Otis Finch. He claimed to have clearly seen Tommy Mercer late at night, right when the cattle rustling occurred. But according to my information gathered from his neighbors, Otis was nearly blind in one eye, and that night, as I recalled, was completely moonless, making visibility practically zero. This was the first, barely noticeable but crucial crack in what seemed like a perfect accusation. Then I requested the official court transcripts, a perfectly normal routine procedure for a lawyer. However, Judge Blackwood, to my surprise, began unusually delaying their release, citing bureaucratic red tape. This alarmed me even more. When the documents finally landed on my desk, I locked myself in my office and began scrutinizing them, line by line. Every page was typewritten, neat, with no visible smudges. But something in one of Finch's testimony lines literally made me freeze and caused a new chilling shock. The word night was clearly typed over another word, carefully inked out. Why? What was Blackwood hiding by trying to alter it? The deeper I delved into these papers, the clearer it became that behind the esteemed judge's impeccable facade lay something sinister, far larger and darker than mere bias. My usual professional curiosity gave way to a cold, piercing realization. I had stumbled upon a trail that could not only destroy the judge's career but completely ruin his life, and possibly mine. The more I dug, the stronger and fiercer my anger grew. It turned out that Otis Finch, the very old farmer whose testimony was the sole basis for Tommy's conviction, had recently received a large sum of money. These funds, coming from some unknown benefactor, significantly exceeded his annual income. It was an obvious direct bribe. But that was just the beginning. I started reviewing old cases where Judge Blackwood had delivered unusually harsh, seemingly arbitrary and cruel sentences. And each time, I found astonishing, ominous coincidences. The accused were always poor or vulnerable, and their lands, or something on them, somehow ended up in the hands of influential people closely connected to the judge himself. Anger boiled within me, turning into a seething rage. Blackwood wasn't just handing down unfair verdicts. He was systematically using his power to seize property from the most defenseless. The most terrifying, chilling realization came when I stumbled upon a case from 15 years ago. A farmer whose family tragically died in a fire was accused of setting his own land ablaze, though there was scarcely any evidence. But Blackwood, despite everything, handed down a death sentence. And the land? It turned out to be incredibly rich in silver deposits, and soon after the farmer's execution, passed into the hands of a large company owned by the judge's distant relatives. At that moment, everything clicked into place. It became crystal clear. Horace Blackwood was not merely a corrupt judge. He was a true predator, mercilessly destroying lives, taking the last possessions from simple folk for his own monstrous gain. My next step could cost me everything, but there was no turning back. I gathered all the evidence, the tampered court transcripts, data on suspicious land deals, testimonies from bribed farmers. My fear was immense, for I was challenging a man who not only ruled this town, but seemed to embody its law. Blackwood was powerful and ruthless. But the anger that had accumulated over these days outweighed any fear. I knew Blackwood would try to stop me, that he would stop at nothing to keep his secret. But it was too late to retreat. At the next court session, as Judge Horace Blackwood prepared to deliver another harsh verdict, I stood up. "Your Honor, I have evidence that calls into question not only this verdict, but all your past decisions," I said, and my voice, surprisingly, sounded firm. A dead silence fell in the courtroom. Every gaze was fixed on me. I began, presenting the tampered transcript from Tommy Mercer's case, then showed inconsistencies in the signatures, and detailed the land deals that linked Blackwood to the expropriation of others' property. Blackwood's face contorted. His usually icy eyes filled with raw panic. He tried to interrupt me, accuse me of slander, threatened me with prison, but it was already too late. My words, backed by irrefutable facts, were already resonating, reaching every corner of the room. When I finished, a marshal, whom I had secretly summoned, silently entered the hall. He displayed a warrant for Judge Horace Blackwood's arrest. The town froze in shock. The man who had symbolized law and order for years turned out to be a criminal, a predator who had mercilessly deceived the most vulnerable. In the eyes of Tommy Mercer, who had just been led out of his cell, a flicker of pure relief appeared. For me, it was a moment of deep acceptance. I knew my life would change forever, that I would have to face the consequences of my resolve. Perhaps I had made dangerous enemies, but I also knew I had done the right thing, regardless of the cost. And though fear lingered somewhere deep inside, far stronger was the overwhelming satisfaction that justice, albeit in such a brutal and dramatic form, had finally triumphed in this wild corner of the West. Judge Blackwood's dark secret was exposed, and the town, shaken to its core, slowly began to heal, cleansing itself of years of oppression.